think it's pretty interesting that every characteristic of old school RuneScape that keeps people from trying it out are the same reasons why the fanbase loves it so much. Every time I hear someone talk about RuneScape negatively, it's always, oh, the graphics suck, gameplay is click and wait, everything takes hundreds of hours to complete. And the funny thing is, they aren't wrong. But those features of the game are exactly what positive reviews cite as some of their favorite parts of the game. The graphics are blissfully stylized, the gameplay is simple with a greater sense of purpose behind it. Everything takes hundreds of hours because you genuinely want to spend hundreds of hours on most things in the game. Your personal goals determined your time invested. Seems like one man's trash is another man's treasure, right? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to A Casual Review, a series where I test and review games so you can decide if you want to try them out. In this video, we're going to be looking at Old School RuneScape, a sandbox MMORPG based on the 2008 version of developer Jagex's RuneScape. We will be taking a look and analyzing how Old School RuneScape presents itself to new players. If you have ever played an online computer game, there is a high chance that you have at least heard of RuneScape. Maybe in a negative way, maybe positive. But there is no denying that RuneScape has played a large part in the evolution of MMORPGs, and has held its place with the big boys of the genre since its launch in 2001. Now, I'm not going to talk about it in length because I wasn't there, but apparently, on the fateful morning of November 20th, 2012, RuneScape's developers, Jagex, released an update called The Evolution of Combat. Many players cite this as the determining factor in the split of the player base. In a nutshell, the update was a change to the combat system, where instead of the old style of click and wait, players would be able to use a more modern combat system with targeted spells and abilities on cooldown. Some people loved it, some didn't. But regardless of your opinion, everyone saw this as a large step towards the new age RuneScape and away from the classic game. Out of this player controversy and a large drop in player population was born Old School RuneScape, a faithful recreation of the game as it was in 2008. This review is going to be about Old School RuneScape specifically, and I won't be mentioning much about RuneScape 3. RuneScape 3 is the current live version of the game that includes all of the changes that Jagex have introduced over the game's lifetime. Both are very good games now, just vastly different. As always, a couple disclaimers before we begin. I did not max out all my skills before writing this review. Even though I've played RuneScape for many hours, both as a paid member and as free to play, I am no expert. So keep in mind that this review will be centered on the new player experience and how the game presents itself to them. This means that although I'll cover the paid membership skills and some of the member benefits, most of what we will cover will be free to play, which includes hundreds of hours of content, so we will have plenty to talk about. Now, let's begin with an overview of OSRS as it stands today. Before we get to actual gameplay, there's two things that we need to discuss about the state of the game and how you should approach it. First, this is Old School RuneScape. You can download a launcher from Jagex themselves or straight off Steam and access the game through your Steam account. This is the game as Jagex intends it, or rather, what they have published on their own. This is RuneLite, the same game through a different launcher that allows for player-made add-ons to seamlessly integrate with the game, and in my opinion, improves the experience in every way. This is how I play. The main reason that I bring this up so early in the review is because a large portion of the player base is using RuneLite as their launcher. What you are seeing in this footage is a player-made HD texture pack, completely free with RuneLite. It's an optional add-on that allows for smoother frame rate and an overall exceptional graphical experience. There are also a number of helpful add-ons to make repetitive parts of the game more efficient and improve your experience for free. And this is the tone that was set for Old School RuneScape as a game. Jagex didn't create an OSRS development team to launch the 2008 version and then just leave it there. The game is still being updated today. The RuneLite launcher is an open source add-on manager, meaning that players can upload their own work and others can enjoy it. The Jagex team endorses this form of evolution and adds in their own changes to the game. The community can develop add-ons, and Jagex will develop the core gameplay. It's a pretty awesome concept in my eyes. The coolest part of this constant development from Jagex is the polling system. No large updates are put into the game without first being presented to the player base. Players that have a certain amount of playtime in the game are then able to vote on the update, to have their voice heard. If the majority of players say yes, the update goes through. If they say no, it doesn't, and Jagex will take it back and scrap it or refine it before trying to release it again. This sort of relationship between the OSRS team and its players could be taken a couple of ways. Some people like the community engagement in the development of the game, and others will say that it's hindering progress. I happen to believe that it's generally a good thing, even though it can be dangerous if the player base is truly split on something. But how does this affect you as a new player? Well, it means that you're going to be playing a game where the experience is much more open and developed than the game originally was in 2008. Your new player experience may be vastly different than someone who had started the game back then. Kind of a beautiful thing, right? You can choose to play the base game and have minimal changes, or you can choose to play on RuneLite and experience a more modern version of the game as it was. It's completely up to you. Regardless of which launcher you choose, the base game is completely the same. So even though my footage will be from the RuneLite client, if you choose the convenience of Steam and download the Jagex launcher, you will have the same general experience. I will specifically call out if something is extremely different, but I don't really play with many add-ons, so really all you will see from RuneLite are floating text details for items on the floor and the HD texture pack. Now let's talk mobile. The complete OSRS game is available on your phone. I usually don't care for playing games on my phone, but honestly, this is probably one of the best ports for mobile that I've ever seen. The simplicity of the gameplay and the UI makes for an easy transition to phones or tablets and enables accessibility to players on the go. And with how much time you spend on resource farming, you will love to have the option to spend that time on mobile. I have personally played OSRS on my phone more than I would like to admit, while eating breakfast, or working at my day job, or while playing World of Warcraft, or in line at the DMV. I am playing OSRS right now, having my dude level up fishing while I write this script. I never thought I would say this, but I actually enjoy playing an MMORPG on my phone, so remember that you have that option when the inevitable fatigue of the grind starts to set in. Obviously, the first part of the review we'll have to tackle is the click and wait gameplay. OSRS is famous for having a very simple player action system. Most actions in the game boil down to this. If you left click on an object that your character can interact with, you'll perform a predetermined action depending on what that object is. For example, if I left click on a lootable item that an enemy dropped when they died, I will pick it up. If it is a stack of items, I will pick up the topmost item. If I left click on another enemy, I will attack that enemy, assuming it is within my level range. If it isn't within my level range, then I'll just move to that location. Basically, you left click to perform a standard quick action that the game has determined for you. If you right click an object, you will bring up a short menu of what actions you can take to interact with that object. Each menu is specific to the type of object that you are right clicking on. If I right click on a lootable item, I'll see a menu to pick it up or just examine it. Examining an object gives you a short description of what it is. The right click menu is used when you want to make a more detailed decision on what you do with an object. But that's basically it. The complexity of the game doesn't come from the controls, that's for sure. But instead, it comes with learning how to interact with different objects and what decision is best at what time. RuneScape is a sandbox MMO, meaning that you are free to play the game however you like. The game is completely open to you immediately after the tutorial. All you have to do is identify your goal and set off on your adventure. The only barrier to taking part in any content is the progression system. The progression system is very simple. You have 23 different skills that you can choose to level in. 15 of these skills are open to you as a free-to-play player, and 8 are members only. These are all pretty important, so I'll give a short description of each. For free-to-play, let's start with the combat skills. Attack is your melee weapon skill. Leveling up your attack skill increases your accuracy with melee weapons, like swords, axes, and maces, and allows you to wield better tier weapons. Strength is your ability to deal more melee damage and equip certain heavy melee weapons. Higher level means higher damage. Defense is your ability to wear stronger armor and decrease the chance of being hit. Leveling this up will let you eventually wear cool-looking and extremely durable armor. Ranged is your ability to equip stronger ranged weapons like bows and crossbows, and the armor that a ranged combatant would use, mostly leather-based. It also increases ranged accuracy. Prayer allows you to activate certain abilities to assist in combat. These will increase in damage or defense or assist you in other ways, but you can only keep them toggled on if you have prayer points left. Prayer points will deplete over time as you use the abilities. The prayer level gives more prayer points, which allows you to keep these abilities toggled on for longer. You can then recharge these prayer points at an altar. Your magic level allows for casting combat and utility spells. The higher your magic level, the more spells you have access to. Rune crafting allows you to create runes, which are needed for casting the spells you learn with the magic ability. The higher your rune crafting level, the higher level runes you can create. These higher level runes are used in higher level spells. Hit points are pretty self-explanatory. As you level this up, you get more hit points. Don't let your hit points get to 0 or bad things will happen. Now let's get into the crafting and gathering skills. The crafting skill allows you to create items such as jewelry, pottery, and ranged armor. Mining allows you to obtain ore from rocks in different mining locations. Higher mining level allows you to mine rare resources. Smithing then allows you to take that ore and craft it into metal armor and weapons. Fishing is just that. There are a number of different fishing locations, each with specific fish types. Cooking lets you create a variety of different meals with higher level food, restoring more health upon use. Some meals are pretty intricate, requiring multiple ingredients for things like cakes, pies, and stews. Fire making lights wood on fire. And finally, woodcutting, which allows you to chop down trees to get wood, which is used for a number of different things in the world like fires, player housing improvements, and making arrows, the latter two of which are for members only. Paying for a membership allows you access to 8 more skills. These, in my mind, are a little more supplementary than the core 15 skills, but allow you to participate in a wider range of other gameplay features. Agility allows you to take shortcuts in the world and increases your energy recharge rate. Herblore lets you make potions. Thieving lets you steal things. Fletching lets you make bows and arrows. Slayer gives you tougher and tougher monster killing quests, which is a member feature. Farming lets you grow food. Construction lets you build things for player housing, another member feature. And Hunter lets you catch small wild animals and other creatures. So yeah, I just threw a lot of skills at you, and it would be a lot to ask of you to instantly remember all of these skills. So instead, let's talk about these skills in terms of your desired progression path. RuneScape being a sandbox MMO means you really do have the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want. And this boils down to a handful of progression paths. We can categorize them like this. There's combat, gathering, and crafting. First, let's talk combat. Because there are no classes, you can choose from 3 different styles to level in at any time. Melee combat includes equipping swords, maces, battle axes, warhammers, scimitars, daggers, and if you are feeling spicy, you can fight unarmed. Melee combat is obviously very personal, forcing you to get up close with your enemy. Most of the time, melee fighters will be using metal armor or shields, which gives you better physical defense, but increases your weight. Weight affects your energy depletion rate, which means you won't be able to run as long, and running is very important no matter what you're doing. Ranged combat has you fight with short bows, long bows, and crossbows. These weapons use ammunition, arrows for bows, bolts for crossbows. Ranged armor is made of leather, giving you more mobility than heavy armor, but better defense than mage armor. Finally, mages equip stabs or wands, but use a variety of spells that require runes to cast. Each spell has a certain combination of runes that must be present in your inventory in order to cast, and will consume the runes when you successfully cast the spell. Higher level spells will be more useful or inflict more damage, but will require higher quality runes. To level your combat skills, all you have to do is equip one of the weapons of your desired combat style and deal damage to enemies. Each point of damage you deal gives a small amount of XP in your combat skill and some in your hit point skill. Once you get enough XP, you level up. The only caveat in this progression system is that melee combat is a little more particular. Melee weapons give you the ability to fight in different styles. You can either be balanced and raise your attack skill, aggressive and raise your power skill, or defensive and raise your defense skill. You can only train one at a time, so it requires a bit more time to level up. That's kind of the trade-off for not needing ammunition or runes to fight. Ranged and magic users are inhibited by the fact that you constantly need to create and carry more ammunition. And ammunition can be extremely expensive to buy, or time-consuming to make. So let's talk about gathering and crafting now. If you want to make a name for yourself by selling resources or crafted items, this is your desired progression path. To gather, you use a pickaxe on mining nodes, axes on the different trees of the world, or fishing nets and fishing rods on fishing nodes. Each time you gather one resource, you gain XP, and gaining levels in the gathering skill allows you to use better gathering tools and gather rarer resources. So you'll be sitting on nodes for quite a long time. It's pretty grindy, as most things in the game are. The only solace is that once you get better tools, you can gather resources faster, which means that you get more money and level your skills faster, so it's very important to upgrade your tools. The other thing to note for gathering is that your inventory is locked to 28 spaces. Most items will not stack in your inventory, which means that each time you go to a node to gather, you will gather 28 of that resource and then need to run back to a bank. This creates a need for efficiency, so you'll start to learn where certain resources are and which ones are closest to a bank for quick storage. Resource gathering is extremely lucrative for this reason. The gathering process is time-consuming and fairly monotonous, so players who are in need of resources to level up their crafting abilities will usually just buy the resource from other players. But if you want to level up your own crafting ability, you have the option of taking those resources you just gathered and creating different items. For example, ore from mining can be smelted in a furnace to make metal bars, which can then be blacksmithed into melee weapons and armor, or bolts for crossbows. You can then sell these or use them, but take it from me. At lower levels, it's more lucrative to sell the resource than sell crafted items. You can just buy the low-level crafted items for pretty cheap. The only additional progression path that is not categorized in combat, gathering, and crafting is a mix of all three. Questing. There are 22 quests available to free players, and hundreds more are available to members. Questing in RuneScape is actually some of the best questing that I've experienced in any MMORPG, mostly because completing them is tangibly rewarding, and each quest you take on is its own mini-story. In addition, Jagex write each quest with a crazy amount of British wit and humor. For example, one of the quests free players can take part in is a humorous take on the story of Romeo and Juliet. You complete a number of tasks to help the two lovers meet, which includes faking Juliet's death with a potion that puts her in a temporary coma. Spoiler alert, by the time you get to the crypt to find her, there's a small cutscene where Romeo tries to wake Juliet up and finds that the potion actually killed her. So he turns around and immediately starts to court Juliet's cousin, forgetting all about the corpse right behind him. And most quests have story, wit, and humor just like this. The game actually gives you a list of potential quests you can go on in your quest journal. If you want to start one, you can click on the title and it'll show you what the requirements are to complete it and where you start it. Each quest you complete will give you more questing points, which lets you take on more quests and access some random things around the world. So questing, combat, gathering, and crafting are your choices in terms of progression. And I just gave you the very basic overview of what to expect from each. The variety of the skills is one of RuneScape's strongest features. There are plenty of different options and directions for you to take your adventure. The difficulty in leveling comes with learning how to most efficiently complete tasks. As a new player, thrust into the world on your own, it'll take many hours to figure out where resources are, how to complete quests, which skills you need to level up in order to use a specific item. If you need help finding things in the game or understanding how the systems work, OSRS has a very detailed wiki. Everyone who plays RuneScape has been on the wiki at least once, so don't feel bad about looking something up. It's often much quicker to do that than it is to learn on your own, which I think is one of the many controversial topics when it comes to old school RuneScape's design. And that is a perfect segue into my favorite part of the review, my opinions. There are plenty of things about RuneScape's gameplay that players will either fall in love with or immediately hate. As with most grindy sandbox MMOs, you'll find out very early in your time playing if you enjoy the type of gameplay that RuneScape has to offer. So let's start talking about those gameplay features and why the design doesn't attract every player. First up is the most important mechanic in any sandbox MMO, the grind. Sandbox MMOs are notorious for long, grindy progression systems. This is their way of letting a player truly master the skill they want to. It separates the players who won't grind from those who will. It's a glorious badge of honor to wear the best gear or to max out your gathering and crafting skills, and in that way, the grind provides a large sense of accomplishment as you level each skill. OSRS has refined this process in many ways. It's not perfect, but each level provides a different benefit as you level in that specific skill. So while you are spending hours upon hours mining ore, the minute you level up, you are shown exactly what new features you're able to access. This provides not only a sense of extremely satisfying accomplishment, but also a strong sense of progression. With each level, you are noticeably better than the last. This doesn't happen at every single level. Some levels will only provide a stat benefit, while others will unlock stronger gear or tools for gathering, but most levels will give you something, especially at lower levels, so you can feel the quick sense of progression early on. The downside to the grind is the actual gameplay while performing the act of that skill. For example, if you're grinding for resources, you are sitting on that resource node for hours. The idea is to gather as efficiently as possible, so that basically means that the gameplay is to find a node closest to the bank, buy the best tool possible, and then click and wait for your inventory to fill up. You sit in one spot, click every time the resource resets, and repeat. Once your inventory is full, you run back to the bank, drop it off, and then head back to the resource to do it again. It's incredibly tedious to me, and I can definitely see why it turns players away. Whenever I grinded resources for a while, I would usually just start playing on my phone so that I could do something else and click on the resource node every couple of seconds, which is not engaging in the slightest. It's only the sense of progression and the promise of reward that keeps you playing the game and grinding more. Which is an interesting concept, right? Because even though it wasn't engaging gameplay at all, I still ended up hopping on my phone more and more often to make sure that I was getting it done. So I must have felt that the reward was worth the grind. Speaking of reward, I've said it a couple times in my other videos, but I love to try and play the economy in MMOs. And in RuneScape, one of the ways you make large amounts of money is by selling items on the Grand Exchange. The Grand Exchange pretty much works like every other player-to-player market in any other MMO. But how does it affect the game? Player-to-player markets are mostly driven by gameplay mechanics. In theme park MMOs, usually the player-to-player market is driven by whatever endgame content is popular at the time. The items that are used in the most popular area of the endgame content will be priced extremely high, as opposed to the items in less popular areas of endgame content. That's just supply and demand. In RuneScape, a sandbox MMO, there really isn't a specific endgame goal. The end game is whatever you want it to be, so the pricing is determined on a multitude of factors. Now, I'm not an expert, but the prices to me seem like they are determined by the community's willingness to spend the time or resources to get that item themselves. It's more of a question of convenience or availability. For example, gathering resources is time consuming, which means that higher level resources that require higher level gathering skills will be more expensive. Players will be more willing to spend a large chunk of gold to not spend the time to level up their own gathering skill, find the resource themselves, and then raise their crafting ability to be able to use that resource to craft what they want. Buying the resource or the item on the Grand Exchange cuts out multiple hours of grindy gameplay. This theoretically makes the economy accessible to each player. No matter what you do, as long as you level up some skill, you will have the ability to make more and more money as you spend more and more time in the game. And making money in OSRS is extremely satisfying. For me, that's the reward that keeps me grinding. The promise of making money with the resources that I am gathering gets me through that click and wait gameplay. However, as a free-to-play new player, there's one thing you need to be aware of. You are at a large disadvantage when it comes to making money in Runescape. Not only are new players broke at the start of their journey and have a hard time making enough money to feed themselves, but they are also unable to take advantage of some of the major benefits that come with being a paid member. RuneScape is a nearly infinite game with so much content it almost feels limitless. That wondrous feeling of a vast world of possibilities will cost you roughly $10 a month though. Free-to-play players have access to hundreds of hours of content. You can truly enjoy the game without spending any amount of money. But take a look at the benefits you get by being a paid member. Members get access to over 3 times more map area to explore. They get 8 additional skills to level and enjoy. They have more rewards and capabilities added to the free-to-play skills you already have. You get 119 more quests to undertake. You get better equipment, like dragon, barrows, and crystal armor and weapons. Members have several more transportation systems that allow you to get around the gigantic map more easily. You'll have access to a number of minigames that are considered one of the most entertaining features of the game. You'll have 400 more bank slots. And you'll get more updates that are added almost every week. All of this begs the question, is RuneScape actually free-to-play? The term free-to-play is thrown on a game just for the marketing appeal, but if we're being honest, RuneScape is not free-to-play. When I hear the term free-to-play, I would assume that at least 50% of the game is accessible to free players. At least. This is the case with a number of other free-to-play games, where monetization comes in the form of cash shops and in-game transactions. OSRS doesn't have an in-game cash shop. Instead, they sell their membership and bonds. Bonds are purchasable in-game items that, when consumed, give you 14 days of membership and can be paid for with real money transactions or using in-game gold. You can also purchase these bonds with RMT and then sell them on the Grand Exchange for gold, which means that the game is also slightly pay to win. It's not completely pay to win, but many, if not all items in the game can be purchased on the Grand Exchange, which means that players who spend money on bonds can turn those bonds into in-game gold and then turn that in-game gold into powerful weapons, tools, and resources. If you watched my Albion Online video, it's very similar to how you can buy gold for real money and convert that into the in-game currency of silver. The problem comes with the fact that items start to lose their worth once you can pay real money for them and skip out on the grind of actually earning them. Both Albion Online and RuneScape are not pay-to-win games necessarily, but you can't deny that there is an advantage to skipping large portions of grindy, repetitive content. In addition, RuneScape bars a player from well over 50% of the game if the player doesn't pay the membership, which means OSRS pushes players towards both a membership fee and gold buying. The benefits of a membership or buying gold become a little more apparent when you put them in terms of gold making. Buying a bond right now will cost you around 5.1 million gold. That is a lot of gold. Looking on some forums and at some money-making guides on YouTube, it seems like once you have a membership and have spent enough time to level up your character to a certain point, you won't have too much of an issue making that gold. It'll require some farming and some money-making grinds every week, but it's doable. The problem is that the majority of money-making techniques are only available to members. Free-to-play players only have access to about a third of the map. They don't have access to some quality of life improvements that members can get through items. They also don't have access to certain tools or certain resources that sell for much more money. There is a lot that free-to-play players can't access, so it definitely puts you at a disadvantage to get that first bond. And if you don't put in the work and can't buy a bond within 2 weeks, then you are shit out of luck and have to start that grind all over again. This also compounds with the fact that it would generally take a free-to-play player much longer to level these skills because of those quality of life improvements and locations they don't have access to, which means it'll take a lot longer to get to the point where you could actually sustain the amount of income needed to maintain your membership with in-game gold. I say all of this not to shit on the game, but to instead prove the point of how valuable the paid membership is. Here's the flip side of this. Think of just how much content you're able to access with only a $10 a month membership fee. The content is all high quality, and the improvements to the gameplay are noticeable, so it's almost a really hard deal to pass up, especially when compared to the amount of content you get from subscriptions in other games. The only reason I didn't become a member for the review was because I wanted to see the game from the eyes of a new free-to-play player. Oh, and I got pissed off because I realized that only members get access to fletching, which means that free-to-play players are at a huge disadvantage when it comes to being an archer. How come free-to-play players can try out runecrafting but they can't try fletching? Buying arrows is extremely expensive. The video is getting pretty long, so I'm going to start rattling off some positives and negatives of different parts of OSRS and just try and get through them quick. OSRS is very accessible. The game is easy to find, easy to install, quick to launch, and on multiple platforms. The mobile app is actually incredibly well made, and with a number of player-made add-ons to help, you can play the game whenever and however you like. OSRS has requirements that each player needs to meet before they can use the Grand Exchange. You need 10 quest points, which is about 3 completed quests, a total skill level of 100, and 20 hours of in-game playtime. The quests are easy and entertaining to complete, so that's really not the issue. Getting to a total skill level of 100 is pretty quick as well. Your total skill level is the combination of every level of each skill combined, so leveling up in any of your 15 free-to-play skills adds to that number. The real kicker here is the time requirement. If I can meet the other 2 requirements in 8 hours of gameplay, that means I have to wait for 12 more hours to use the exchange. And that's in-game hours, not real-world hours. I feel like this penalizes me for playing efficiently by introducing an unnecessary requirement. There are a lot of people playing this game. On some of the more populated worlds, you are constantly fighting for resources and witnessing weird interactions between other players. If you don't like the amount of people playing on your server, you can change with the click of a button. It also shows that OSRS is a very social game. In my first couple hours of playing, I had one guy log in with the sole purpose of talking to a random stranger and giving me 10,000 gold before he logged off to go to work. Literally 30 minutes or so later, I go to the bank in the starting area and someone gives me another 10k and says Merry Christmas. Overall, people I met were extremely friendly. The minute I arrived in the starting area after the tutorial, I saw about 15 bots that were being created in front of my eyes. Some guy named Steven had numbered accounts that would follow people around and copy their actions. I'm assuming this is some sort of multi-boxing account selling operation in the works. Made it hard to trust if players farming at the mining nodes were bots or not. Like, is it suspicious that they don't talk, don't move, and grind the same resource for the entire day? Or is that just part of Runescape? There are random events that happen while you're out in the world doing other things. For example, while I was out fighting goblins, I had this cat named Evil Bob show up and whisk me away to a prison. To escape, I had to solve a little puzzle. Once I solved it, I got a fairly sizable reward. I think that's awesome. Even though I've gone over so many topics, there are still parts of RuneScape and even the free-to-play experience that I haven't even touched on. Take that as a sign that once you get in the game, you'll have an entire world densely packed with content for you to enjoy. Yes, at least the free-to-play part. Like I said before, you'll figure out pretty early on if you enjoy the type of game that RuneScape is. I'll say though, the true experience is not in free-to-play, so look at it like a free trial and experience the small taste of the world that you could enjoy. Also, use the wiki. There are way too many things to remember in the game. Until you get used to things, don't be afraid to look something up. Lastly, just relax. This game isn't supposed to be an adrenaline rush at all times. There are parts of the game that get intense, but those are usually at higher levels and mostly for members. So just play, have fun with your friends, and relax. The way I look at it, 90% of the gameplay can be completed while drunk. So this isn't a game where you have to be sweaty all the time. Thanks for watching. Remember to leave a like if you liked it, and click that subscribe button for more casual reviews. I hope you have fun with your RuneScape adventures, and I can't wait to see what we talk about next.